One, two, three.
In November of 1993, the governor of New Jersey opens a 20-mile stretch of superhighway that has taken 40 years and $1 billion to build. Transportation officials say it is the end of a massive highway building program, the likes of which will never be seen again. At Chicago's O'Hare Airport, a business executive has to wait over an hour for a 40-minute flight. There's not a cloud in the sky, and he will miss his appointment. As the 20th century draws to a close, Americans are seeing the end of an era. Our transportation system, once the envy of the world, is not ready to carry us into the 21st century. But even as motorists rushed onto the new interstate, an answer could be seen streaking across the New Jersey countryside. An answer that helped build our past and can carry us into the future. It is a train, but it is unlike any we have ever seen before. In Germany, it is known as the Intercity Express, but in America, it is simply called the Ice Train. In June of 1993, one of the ice trains operated by the German Federal Railway was taken out of service and was prepared for shipment to the United States. The train will undergo extensive testing by Amtrak, America's national passenger railroad corporation, as it looks to purchase high-speed train sets for future use in America. After being tested, the train will visit 26 cities before spending 2.5 months in regular Amtrak Metroliner service between Washington, D.C. and New York. The tour is part of a joint effort between Amtrak and the builders of the train, Siemens and AEG, to give Americans a chance to see and feel what modern rail transportation has to offer. The ice train is a prominent example of high-speed rail, something fairly new to Americans, but which has been around for more than 20 years in other parts of the world. High-speed rail is an intelligent blend of speed, efficiency, and creature comforts. Relaxed passengers are whisked from city to city in less time than it would take to drive or fly. Appropriately, the ice train was unveiled at Union Station in Washington, D.C. The station itself is a reminder of the golden age of railroads in this country, when trains dominated our way of life, and the stations were monuments to their importance.
Welcome to the first official unveiling of the ice train in the United States of America. Union Station, splendidly renovated just 5 years ago, provides the perfect backdrop for demonstrating to everyone the true renaissance of the railroad.
The ice train is the impressive result of a concerted effort of Germany's most sophisticated industries.
Just to look at this high-speed thoroughbred is to realize that train technology has come a long way from the days of the iron horse. For over 150 years, the railroads helped build this country into an industrial and financial superpower. But sadly, a once proud heritage of railroading has been lingering on the edge of extinction, while almost every other major industrial country has developed some form of high-speed rail. Among the most notable are the famed bullet train of Japan, France's popular TGV, and the Intercity Express. Like its peers, the ice train is capable of speeds almost twice that of conventional trains. In Germany, where it's been operating since 1991, the train has been tested at over 250 miles per hour and runs up to 175 miles per hour in service. It's so efficient that even the energy from braking is recycled. This, combined with the aerodynamic design, enables it to use only 25% as much energy per passenger as a car and only 35% as much as an airplane. Even in Germany, where train travel is common and service is always on time, the train has been a major success.
The high-speed trains of Europe are causing a major resurgence in travel. Where high-speed trains are put on a route, the passenger increases are astounding. They're 30%, 50%, 90%. What we are learning is the traveling public historically will move from one form of transportation to the next when the next one becomes better.
The train heads out on a test run over the 250 miles of track between Washington and New York City. The journey is reminiscent of the heyday of American railroads, when a train route linking great cities was known as a metropolitan corridor. And this corridor is America's oldest and busiest. It was here in Baltimore in 1830 that the B&O Railroad ran Tom Thumb, the first locomotive to be built in America. Its top speed was 18 miles an hour. And it was also here that the first official railroad station in America was built.
Amtrak train number 112 to the Grocery North, and then the 112 out.
From the air, it's easy to see why the ice train is so efficient. Not only are high-speed trains aerodynamically designed, they're also built and operated as a complete group or set of cars. Power units replace locomotives and are located at both ends of the train so that it can easily head back on a return trip. Inside, passengers are surrounded with the latest in high-tech wizardry and a rider-friendly environment. The ice train is the most spacious of all the high-speed trains, with plenty of seat room, including adjustable armrests and seat backs. The interior is pressurized, much like that of an airplane, for a quiet, smooth ride, uninterrupted by passing trains. All the seats have headphones for audio entertainment, and selected seats have video screens to watch news and feature films. There are pull-out work surfaces for laptop computers and tables for eating at your seat. There are also European-style cabins, cellular public phones, a conference room, and even a fax machine. Glass doors between cars open automatically as a passenger approaches. On this day, the ice train will go over 160 miles per hour. Not as fast as it goes in Germany, but it is important because more than anything else, it is speed that will determine the fate of high-speed rail in the United States. If trains are to compete successfully with other modes of transportation, they must show they are faster and better at getting people from one place to another.
It takes trains that are fast, it takes trains that are economical to the customer, and it takes trains that are comfortable. If we look at this particular train, the German ICE, that's what you see, is a train that's capable of speed and capable of a level of comfort that is successful. Where we've instituted high-speed service, and I'm talking now about between New York and Washington, we have been successful. When you institute high-speed service, comfortable, affordable, they come to it in great numbers.
Today, the Northeast Corridor continues to be the most heavily traveled route in the country. It is here that Amtrak has already proven that high-speed rail, even on a modest level, can be successful. Amtrak's Metroliner service operates at up to 125 miles per hour and is the single largest carrier between Washington, D.C. and New York City, with some 40% of travelers. However, these trains are now 20 years old and are not nearly as fast, efficient, or as comfortable as the newer breed of trains. One of the biggest obstacles to bringing true high-speed rail to America is not the train itself, but the corridor along which the train travels. In order to achieve higher speeds, the trains must be electric and should travel along rails that are welded together and lined with a concrete base. Like a superhighway, all people, cars, and trucks must cross either over or under the tracks. This actually makes high-speed trains much safer than conventional trains. Amtrak, with the help of federal funds, is currently upgrading the Northeast Corridor. However, there are few places in the rest of the United States where tracks are even electrified. Because the country is so large and diverse, it would require a great deal of cooperation on all sides to bring high-speed rail to some of the busiest intercity corridors in the country.
It's interesting that trains used to be the predominant form of transportation in our country when it was first founded. Now we're seeing a renewed interest in train technology, and as we make it more available, I think more and more Americans will be excited about taking high-speed trains throughout the United States. So we're working in partnership between the federal government and the states and the cities and the private sector to develop high-speed rail corridors around the country, and by working together we can leverage limited federal dollars into multi-billions of dollars throughout the country.
While the initial costs of upgrading existing tracks and purchasing new train sets are substantial, the long-term benefits of using high-speed electric trains are even more significant.
Many of the industrialized countries, Germany, Japan, France, and others, made the decision that they would start building high-speed train systems because they had a greater respect for the confines of their country. They did not want to build 10 and 14 lane freeway systems. They did not want to create the kind of pollution in their cities that we've created. And because they've made wise environmental and fiscal decisions, they went ahead and built high-speed train systems, but they also built sensible transit systems and commuter train systems.
Ironically, non-polluting electric trains were introduced in this country around the turn of the century. The smoke from burning coal and steam engines had become a major obstacle to building stations in the heart of cities like New York and Baltimore. To make this possible, electric locomotives would replace the steam engine at a switching station outside the city and then pull the train cars the rest of the way underground. Eventually, tracks would be electrified all the way down to Washington, D.C., as far north as New Haven, Connecticut, and out onto Long Island. But in the end, electric trains became the exception rather than the rule in America. With technical testing complete, the Ice Train National Tour began in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where so much of America's railroad history was made.
Pennsylvania had a fantastic history of rail. The Pennsylvania Railroad was known as the standard railway of the world. It, in fact, was the largest employer in the world for a while. So you think of the Pennsylvania Railroad was the GM of its day. Anybody in Pennsylvania that you knew, chances are he had a relative that worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad.
In its heyday, the railroad not only connected cities and towns, it created them. In places like Altoona, Pennsylvania, whole industries sprang up around the needs of the trains, and the station became the center of town. In some places, Main Street itself was lined with train tracks. Penn Station in Pittsburgh was right in the heart of a thriving downtown area. The beautiful rotunda that welcomed passengers from far and wide was a symbol of the railroad's economic, political, and social significance. Today, as the train of the future goes on public display for the first time, the old station has been renovated into luxury apartments. Downtown is no longer the bustling heart of the city, and passengers must enter the Amtrak ticket office from a side street.
The purpose of the tour is essentially to demonstrate this product to people outside of the Northeast who don't have the chance to see high-speed rail. And that's it. It's extremely hard to communicate the benefit of a product unless you can see it and touch it and feel it. That's what this is all about. Put customers in touch with the reality of high-speed trains.
I think it's gorgeous. This would be very nice if they would go this way. I would probably travel on trains much more often.
It's great. The interior is great. There's a lot more room to walk around and the seats are much more comfortable.
Very nice, very comfortable, very sleek.
Hopefully something will come of this. Will be a new era for us.
As crowds gather to see the ice train, a seemingly endless procession of freight cars creeps by, a reminder of a glorious past and evidence of how the majority of railroads are used today. In the morning, the train heads east toward Philadelphia. On its way, it passes through Johnstown, once a booming railroad city and site of the Great Flood. Later, it makes its way around the famous Horseshoe Curve at Altoona. Like a racing car without gas, the ice train without electric wires overhead must be towed by a diesel-electric locomotive. First introduced back in 1925, the diesel-electric engine actually uses the diesel motor to create electricity, which in turn drives the train. The massive diesel engine is a stark contrast to the sleek, more powerful train behind it. It's an irony that will not be lost to the thousands of Americans who will lay eyes on the ice train in the weeks ahead. A short stop in Harrisburg, the state capital, brings out more sightseers anxious to get a peek at the space-age train. For years, whistle-stop tours like this one played a prominent role in America's history. Many presidential candidates, including Teddy Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and Dwight Eisenhower, took their campaigns directly to the people on the back of a train.
The passenger train was the first reliable, all-weather, mechanical form of land transportation. Prior to the coming of the passenger train, if you wanted to get from here to there, you had to walk or hitch up the wagon or ride the mule. After the passenger train, you could travel rain or shine, day or night, good weather and bad. And it made you tremendously portable. It gave the nation mobility, which it had never experienced before.
With this new mobility came a new sense of time, of doing things faster. In the early 1840s, it might take 3 weeks to go from Boston to Washington, D.C. With the coming of the railroad, one could do it in just 2 days. Time quickly became a valuable commodity. Cities became closer together, and people began to travel regularly between metropolitan centers. And the most famous intercity train was the 20th Century Limited. In many ways, the Limited was the ice train of its day, offering fast, efficient service with luxury accommodations. It ran between New York City and Chicago for more than half a century, from 1902 to 1967. With its first-class amenities and excellent service, no other train better epitomized the heyday of American passenger rail. And nothing symbolized the elegance and pure comfort of riding a train like the dining car. The majority of the dining and sleeping cars were made by the Pullman Company. The Pullman Porter was a symbol that the passenger could expect the very best in service and comfort. While the 20th Century Limited became famous for its passenger service, as the years passed, there was increasing pressure to get places even faster and to be on time. One way to shorten trips was to reduce or limit the number of station stops. This practice gave rise to the trend of putting the word limited or express at the end of a train's name. It's not surprising that the railroad industry itself created the system of standard time zones we know today to help coordinate the arrival and departure of trains from different parts of the country. And nowhere was this more important than the place where all trains came together, the city of Chicago, the next stop on the ice train tour.
From WBBM-TV Chicago, this is Channel 2 News at 4:30.
It's called the Ice Train, and today it made a stop at Chicago's Union Station. It is super slick, super fast, and super luxurious.
As the ice train pulls into Union Station, the huge rail yards that survive today are testimony to the importance of this city as one of the great railroad capitals of the world. In fact, the city was built in large part because of the railroad. At the turn of the century, all trains heading east or west, north or south, found their way here. Thousands of new immigrants, business travelers, and farmers heading west to stake their claim came through every day. To accommodate the many railroads, 6 large terminals were built in the years between 1885 and 1925. The beautifully renovated Union Station is one of only 2 that survive today. Departing Chicago, the ice train heads southwest toward St. Louis, across the heartland of America.
Some Central Illinois residents got a chance to look at the transportation of the future today. One of the world's fastest trains stopped at the Springfield Amtrak station today as part of a 2-month tour of the United States.
Like the whistle-stop tours of the past, the train stops in small towns, while representatives from Siemens, AEG, and Amtrak tell people how a train like this may one day come through here on a regular basis.
The first thing you notice about the ice train is it has anything you could want on board. Automatic doors, fax machines, even a television.
St. Louis, nestled along the banks of the Mississippi, also has a proud railroad heritage and was a great center of train activity for many years. At one time, 23 different privately owned railroads operated trains in and out of Union Station, the most in the country. In fact, the commonly used name of Union Station referred to the coming together of different railroads in one place. Today, however, the ice train will have to enter through a parking lot because the station has been renovated into a shopping mall and conference center with only a few tracks left for display. In the early days of passenger rail, stations barely existed. In Washington, D.C., the station stop was the back of a tailor shop. But by the late 19th century, American railroad executives began to see the station as more than just a place to get on and off a train. When Pennsylvania Station was completed in 1910 on the west side of Manhattan, it was the largest structure of its kind in the world. And when Grand Central Station was completed across town a few years later, it was heralded as an architectural marvel. What made these places so remarkable was their combination of form and function. The huge interior hall gave little hint of the extensive network of ramps, hallways, and tunnels linking the station with hotels, subways, and offices, while the exterior rivaled that of a great art museum. Soon, great stations began to appear across the country. Union Station, Los Angeles, is a good example of a space designed as a place of human assembly, where people of all classes could mingle. Natural light, spacious rooms, and comfortable seating all serve to give the sense of freedom even on the busiest days. Today, the station serves thousands of commuters daily, as well as Amtrak passengers traveling along the Pacific Corridor from Los Angeles to Seattle. In the heyday of passenger trains, the train routes of California were some of the busiest.
You had a renaissance in the late 30s as the Depression ended and the railroads began to put on trains like the Coast Daylight between San Francisco and Los Angeles. You had 22-car trains carrying 700 to 800 people, a very popular service. We had virtually a non-stop train from Oakland to Sacramento with a ferry connection from San Francisco. You had 6 trains to Los Angeles on the coast route. You had 4 in the valley route. You had Santa Fe trains, the Golden Gates, and the heyday lasted pretty well into the 50s.
In recent years, California has struggled with its ever-growing need for effective mass transit and is seriously considering the introduction of high-speed rail.
We need alternative forms of transportation to freeways. Our freeways are giant parking lots. Our airports are clogged. We simply don't have the billions of dollars that it's going to take to put in new airports. High-speed rail is a practical, efficient, environmentally sound answer to so many of our problems.
The Pacific Ocean is a reminder of the early pioneer dream of going west. In the mid-19th century, railroads played a vital role in America's rapid expansion westward. At one time, there were more tracks laid in the United States than the rest of the world combined. Whole towns and cities were built up around the tracks that crossed prairies, foothills, and great mountain ranges. When the first transcontinental railroad was completed in 1869, it formed a vital link between the industrious East and the young, ambitious West. Soon, a tremendous infrastructure was created throughout the country. It was here in Sacramento that work began on the western half of the Transcontinental Railroad over 140 years ago.
Right. Okay, tour shirt. Do you have one at the back on it?
Not yet.
The city's famous train museum opened its doors to pay tribute to a bygone era, and at the same time welcome a train that could help bring railroading back to the forefront of transportation in America.
If you take a look down right now, you'll see this beautiful train right in West Sacramento. It's headed for Sassoon. It'll travel about 60 to 70 miles an hour, but normally it will speed along nearly 3 times that fast.
And if you'd like to get a look at this train, it's an OSAC, open to the public until 3 this afternoon.
Loved the train. It's fantastic. I hope we get one.
I thought it was enough to make me want to travel by train.
Yes, very nice, very nice.
Railroads have had a profound effect on the growth and development of California. And there's perhaps no other single transportation technology which has influenced the Golden State to the extent that railroads have. And we believe quite strongly that railroads have an important and vital place in the future of transportation in the far West.
In San Francisco, the train station has been torn down and replaced by a simple modern structure on the outskirts of town. It's geared toward commuter trains and the thousands of passengers who pass through every day without a glance.
Is that it? All right, gentlemen. There's a few buses that run in, but there's no metro.
California coastline is a very scenic ride, and if you have the kind of comfort,
California has been probably the most aggressive state in expanding intercity passenger service, and we think so for very wise reasons. We can move more people at one time between 2 points than any other mode of transportation, period. It's efficient, it's respectful of the environment, but most importantly, customers will use it.
What happened to the railroad? How could the single most influential industry of the 19th century be so forgotten and neglected by the second half of the 20th century? It began with the invention of the automobile. When the automobile was first introduced, it gave people tremendous mobility. They could come and go as they pleased and get places faster. Soon, mass production made it possible for the great majority of people to own a car. But the automobile would not have a serious effect on the railroads until a national highway system could be built. And it began, ironically, in the very heart of America's railroad heritage, with the opening of the Pennsylvania Turnpike in 1940. Massive government-backed highway construction soon began. A program so huge it would even surpass the size and scope of the mighty railroads. The second blow came with the introduction of the commercial airliner. Not since the advent of passenger rail had there been such a major advance in the time it would take to go from one city to the next. The airplane revolutionized transportation, and soon airports would appear in every major city. But the railroads were also victims of their own success. Lack of competition allowed the railroad barons of the turn of the century to build mighty empires around the iron horse. When the railroad began to succumb to competition from automobiles and planes, few were willing to come to the rescue. The railroads had always been privately owned and operated, and by the 1950s, the government was more interested in supporting the building of highways and airports. But the rapid development of these forms of transportation has been a mixed blessing. Today, roads and runways are overburdened, and there's little room for expansion, especially in crowded urban areas. At the same time, America's demand for mobility continues to grow. Experts predict that surface travel will more than double in the next 25 years.
A study in Florida concluded that without high-speed trains, by the year 2020, Florida would have to have a 44-lane highway between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. There is no way Florida or the United States can afford to build 44-lane highways. Fiscally, it's impossible. So Florida has said, look, high-speed rail for our state is not a quote, nice thing to have. It is a vital necessity for the future mobility of our people, for the economic development of our state, and to protect our environment.
Our country is not where we ought to be in offering this new technology to America, to the traveling public, to all of you. People are beginning to realize that there are only so many highways you can build. Our highways are congested all over the country. Even our airports are beginning to become more and more congested with delays and other problems, so people are looking for alternatives. And now that we have the possibility of having high-speed rail in this country, I think that's a very viable option for people to take.
High-speed trains are not new to America. The famous locomotive number 999 was clocked at 112 miles an hour as early as 1893. When the diesel-electric streamline train arrived in 1934, it set a record for non-stop distance at an average speed of 77 miles per hour. But the concept of high-speed rail is new. It's not meant to replace cars or planes. It's meant to help balance the overall transportation infrastructure.
One of the problems with transportation in the United States is we design systems independently of each other without taking into account how to make travel easier for passengers. There are about 50 flights a day between Chicago's O'Hare Airport and Milwaukee. What a gross misuse of O'Hare Airport. We ought to have a high-speed train line right out of O'Hare to Milwaukee. I'd like to see that train integrated with the aviation system. Your bag gets checked through.
Integrating many modes of transporting people is referred to as intermodal transportation. A train would not only stop downtown, making connections with buses and subways, but continue on to airports and make direct connections with flights. Conceivably, a passenger could take a bus, a train, and a plane to reach his destination, using only a single ticket while his luggage is handled automatically. Some airlines in Europe are already offering this service to their customers. In America, however, intermodalism has not been as quick to catch on. Many cities are adding light rail systems to alleviate congestion and pollution, but high-speed trains between large metropolitan centers may be the missing link. Amtrak was founded by the federal government in 1971 to save what was left of a failing passenger rail system. Since then, Amtrak ridership has grown from 16.5 million riders to 22 million in 1991. In addition to the successful Metroliner route, Amtrak has been able to appeal to the scenic value of crossing the country by train. As the ice train moves across the Southwest, it's easy to see why. The writer Thomas Wolfe once wrote, "To anyone outside, a speeding train is a thunderbolt of driving rods, a hot hiss of steam, a blurred flash of coaches, a wall of movement and of noise, a shriek, a wail." And then just emptiness and absence, with a feeling of there goes everybody, without knowing who anybody is. But if one is inside the train, everything is different.
There are a lot of closet rail fans, as I call them, out there. Whenever we bring out a steam engine, the highways are clogged. I know my friends in both the bus and the air businesses, what do you guys have that we don't have? There is I hate to use it, nostalgia about railroads, because I want people to ride trains for their effectiveness, not because they're nostalgic about it.
After leaving Florida and traveling up the East Coast, the ice train finishes up the tour with a trip through New England. Here in Portland, Maine, the arrival of the train has special meaning. It's the first passenger train to come to town in almost 30 years.
Oh, it was wonderful. Beautiful dining
watch TV right in front of you. It's great.
Nice to see train service again. I love to ride trains.
That was great. I'd like to see it come to Portland sometime soon.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I wish they had it right now.
Ironically, the train is parked alongside the main turnpike, the highway that ended the need for rail transportation here. At its peak, the railroad brought trains from as far south as Washington, D.C. and as far west as Chicago. Trains made regular stops in places like Bangor and Bar Harbor. These routes were some of the most scenic in America. In 1960, the writer E.B. White said of the demise of passenger rail, "And what is the railroad to me? I have to admit that it means a great deal to me. It is the link with my past, for one thing, and with the city, for another. Two connections I would not like to see broken. The railroads of Maine are eager to break these connections. I live in the twilight of railroading, the going down of its sun."
The private railroads were not interested in carrying people, they were more interested in carrying freights, and the costs were so prohibitive, they began to eliminate the service. But at that point, we really didn't care. I stepped into my new car and filled it with inexpensive gas and got on the brand new Maine Turnpike and scooted along to Boston the day that they tore down Union Station and the last passenger train pulled out over 30 years ago. But back then, the words may have been in the dictionary, but they weren't in our vocabulary. Words like pollution, congestion, energy conservation, those were not considerations 35 years ago. We were all very ignorant.
The ice train that we have beside us here today is precisely the sort of new technology that will help keep this state at the very center of economic growth and activity.
But now, Maine is looking at a future that includes trains. Amtrak is planning to work with the state to bring back passenger service.
A few years from now, many of us will gather again to welcome the commencement of high-speed rail service to Maine on a regularly scheduled basis.
As the ice train slowly pulls out of Portland and heads back to Washington, D.C., it will have covered more than 30,000 miles of track, visited more than 25 cities, and received thousands of visitors, reminding Americans of a proud heritage that helped forge this country and at the same time give them a glimpse into the future.
This is an extraordinarily important day and a very timely opportunity to bring to the mind of the American people something that they have been asking for many years. In fact, this whole high-speed rail initiative really is a grassroots push from the American people looking for this option to travel in this country.
In October of 1993, the ice train was put into regular Amtrak Metroliner service, giving passengers a taste of what future service might be like. While there are no more Pullman porters, high-speed rail trains have done much to bring back the total experience of riding the train. The Board restaurant car offers passengers a complete dining service with onboard chefs preparing meals to order.
There's no doubt in my mind that people would love to have dining cars like this because immediately people go back to other experiences they've had years past or in other dining cars that they compare this to. I had a woman this afternoon that compared her meal here with the best that she'd ever had.
At the other end of the car is a bistro for sandwiches and snacks.
It makes train travel an adventure again. Famous trains like the 20th Century Limited, you read about, you know, and all those images just come back now. and I hope it's the wave of the future.
This train speeds right along, but you still have a view, and you can move around, you can eat in the restaurant. It's a great experience.
A computer allows travelers to check train schedules and other information. The first-class coach offers spacious 2-in-1 seating. It is this return to personal attention that has many referring to high-speed rail as the renaissance of the railroad.
It's a lot easier to work on this train, and there just seems more space to move around in.
I like the notion of being able to, conduct business on the train. Fax machines, telephones. I think these things are important to people who are on the train a lot.
Once again under its own power, the ICE train is driven by 3-phase asynchronous traction motors for high reliability and extremely low maintenance. A digital drive control monitors the traction to minimize slippage and guarantee efficient power distribution. Below, the wheel sets will go up to 600,000 miles without needing adjustment.
I've been in the railroad industry 28 years, coming up on 29. Seen a lot of changes in it. Never in my life did I think we would have equipment like this.
For more than 100 years, America's railroads dominated this country and led the world into the 20th century. They harnessed great energy and power and drove it straight down a track carrying the country with them. The metropolitan corridors that connected cities, great and small, were the lifelines that helped develop a growing nation and made all things seem possible. If Americans look once again to the railroad for swift, reliable, even luxurious travel, the corridors will emerge once again as an elegant solution to the nation's travel needs. The ICE train brings to mind a quote from the movie Field of Dreams. Build it, and they will come.
This sleek intercity express, or ICE train, was taken out of service in Germany and prepared for an historic 6-month tour and demonstration in the United States. Through the combined efforts of Siemens, AEG, the German Federal Railroad, and Amtrak, the American people were able to see and experience the hottest thing on rails. The aerodynamic train arrived at the Port of Baltimore to begin technical trials with Amtrak. Amtrak's evaluation of the ICE train was part of its planned purchase of 26 high-speed train sets for the Northeast Corridor. Siemens and AEG, the train's manufacturers, have teamed up with General Motors' Electromotive Division to form High Speed America, a consortium that will bid to produce an American version of the ICE, designed to meet the particular needs of Amtrak's Northeast Corridor and beyond. The companies that form High Speed America have 3 centuries of experience in railroad technologies, and they are prepared to build high-speed trains in the United States if successful in their Amtrak bid. High-Speed America is committed to helping Amtrak become the primary operator of a modern, efficient, and environmentally sound intercity rail system. The speedy ice train has been tested at over 250 miles per hour. Amtrak received a special waiver from the Federal Railroad Administration for a speed trial along the Northeast Corridor between Washington, D.C. and New York. The ice train reached an astonishing 162 miles per hour on American tracks, almost one-third faster than the fastest passenger trains in the United States. After the completion of technical testing, the ice train began its national tour, visiting many of the largest American cities from coast to coast. The two-month tour included those areas designated by Congress as potential high-speed corridors. In its journey across the United States, the ice train traveled some 20,000 miles, pulled by a pair of state-of-the-art diesel-electric locomotives manufactured by EMD and Siemens. Almost 100,000 Americans saw the ice train on its national tour, while millions more saw it on news reports and read about it in newspapers and magazines. Leading politicians, including Secretary of Transportation Federico Pena, hailed high-speed rail as the future of transportation in America. With the tour complete, the ice train began its toughest test, convincing regular passengers that it should be the Amtrak train of the future. In 2.5 months of daily Amtrak Metroliner service between Washington, D.C. and New York, the train performed flawlessly. Passenger enthusiasm was high, increasing Amtrak ridership by 30% on the ice train. Reaching speeds of up to 135 miles per hour, the ice train whisked passengers to and from New York in unprecedented luxury. 30,000 passengers rode the ice train during its Metroliner service, getting a rare opportunity to experience the finest high-speed rail technology the world has to offer.
It has a face full of character, the TGV Atlantique. Since September 1989, these second-generation French high-speed trains have linked Paris with the Atlantic coast towns of Brest in northern Brittany and Nantes at the mouth of the Loire. And from summer 1990, the Atlantique will be narrowing the gap between Bordeaux and the southern region up to the Spanish border and the capital on the Seine. This brand new maintenance center at Châtillon on the western outskirts of Paris, specially built for the Atlantique, is home to all 95 trains of the series. The depot at Châtillon, which is equipped with the latest technology, functions as a center of operations, watching over everything from cleaning to the technical supervision and running of the TGV Atlantique fleet. Each train has 2 engines and 10 central carriages, giving it a total length of 775 feet exactly. In each of the 90-foot engines, each of which weighs 68 tons, 4 3-phase current synchronized motors have been installed. Together, they produce the powerful joint output of 8,800 kilowatts or 12,000 horsepower. When carrying a normal load, the TGV Atlantique weighs 490 tons. A featherweight for the powerful motors which permit a swift acceleration and along the newly laid stretch of track, a cruising speed of 186 miles per hour. The enormous reserves built in by French constructor Alstom will become evident later on when we join the 325 for her fantastic world record run.